Some neighborhoods worry about crime, but HOA boards worry about things like aggressively beige fences and wind chimes that chime too, enthusiastically. And if you think that's the dumb part, oh no, this chaos hasn't even stretched yet. 1. A lawn flamingo uprising started the morning and HOA decided a single pink bird was visual clutter. The homeowner had placed exactly one, just one, fabulous, slightly faded flamingo near a hydrangea bush. Within hours, the HOA issued a formal violation letter describing it as unapproved wildlife effigy decor and demanding its removal. The board treated the bird like it was plotting sedition rather than minding its own plastic business. The resident, irritated by the absurdity, complied, sort of. They replaced the lone flamingo with 29 more, arranged in an ominous semicircle like a cult waiting for their leader. The HOA panicked, calling an emergency meeting as if suburban diplomacy had collapsed. The punchline? The board fined the homeowner for creating a hostile decoration environment, proving nothing terrifies an HOA more than a homeowner who understands the power of escalation. 2. A mailbox crime spree unfolded when one homeowner installed a perfectly ordinary black mailbox, except it failed the HOA's sacred rule that all mailboxes must be the approved shade of charcoal serenity, a color apparently invented by someone who hates joy and owns too many binders. The difference between the forbidden black and the blessed charcoal? Roughly half a shade and the willpower to pretend it matters. The HOA fined the resident daily, sending letters so aggressively formal they may as well have been handwritten by a disappointed Victorian aunt. The neighbor eventually repainted the mailbox using the HOA's official sample card, only for the board to fine them again because the sun reflected off the fresh paint too boldly. It was the closest suburban America has come to outlawing photons. 3. A garden gnome became public enemy number 1 after an HOA declared it an unauthorized humanoid figurine exerting disruptive whimsy. The gnome in question wasn't even mischievous. No red eyes, no middle finger, no murder-adjacent grin, just a sleepy ceramic guy holding a watering can. Yet the HOA treated it like it violated the Geneva Conventions. They fined the owner repeatedly, insisting the gnome threatened neighborhood uniformity. The homeowner, exhausted by bureaucracy but fueled by spite, replaced the gnome with a rock. The HOA approved the rock. The homeowner then painted a gnome face on the rock. The HOA attempted to fine the face. The rock remained legally a rock. The HOA nearly imploded, trying to define whether a drawing could constitute a prohibited statue, proving that sometimes the easiest way to defeat tyranny is to weaponize semantics. 4. A driveway chalk masterpiece spiraled into suburban warfare after a pair of kids drew flowers, clouds, and a very friendly-looking dinosaur. The HOA declared the art graffiti, issuing fines like they were trying to set a regional record. Their official violation letter solemnly insisted that chalk, temporary, washable chalk, undermines the visual harmony of the development. Meanwhile, the rain washed the entire masterpiece away 2 days later, which should have ended the saga. But no, the HOA fined the parents again because the residual chalk particles might someday reassemble into a recognizable image. The board essentially accused rainfall of aiding and abetting an artistic crime scene. Nothing says community spirit like punishing weather patterns. 5. A holiday wreath ignited an HOA crisis because it contained a bough deemed too crimson, violating the official color palette of seasonal muted tones. To enforce this bizarre doctrine, the HOA sent an evaluator armed with a laminated color wheel like some suburban inquisition. The wreath, a perfectly normal festive decoration, became contraband because it dared to lean cheerful. The homeowner replaced the bow with one they dyed themselves using tea bags to achieve approved sadness. The HOA still fined them because the wreath expressed emotional assertiveness. Only in these neighborhoods can a ribbon get charged with having too much personality. 6. A solar-powered garden light faced judgment when the HOA declared it unapproved nighttime illumination inconsistent with established ambiance. Translation: the board hated that a soft glow existed. The homeowner installed it because their walkway was dark enough to qualify as a medieval quest hazard. The HOA insisted the darkness was intentional design. They fined the household for introducing unsanctioned lumens. Yes, lumens, as if photons were committing fraud. The best part? The board later added official path lighting identical to the banned one. When the homeowner pointed out the hypocrisy, The HOA claimed their version radiated authorized brightness. It was the first time in history someone used light itself as a power move. 7. A homeowner accidentally created political chaos by placing a welcome mat that read, "Hi." Somehow the HOA interpreted this as non-neutral messaging. According to the violation letter, the mat was an unsolicited statement potentially influencing community discourse. It was literally a greeting, not a manifesto. The board insisted mats must be patterned, nonverbal, and emotionally neutral. The resident replaced the mat with one depicting a row of dots. The HOA approved it, stating that dots carry no ideological implication. Meanwhile, everyone walking by had to step onto what looked like Morse code for "send help." 8. A backyard tomato plant unleashed governance mayhem after the HOA classified it as unauthorized agriculture. The homeowner had grown exactly 3 tomato plants, not a sprawling farm, not a capitalist tomato empire. 3. The HOA claimed produce-based hobbies threatened property values by suggesting a semi-rural aesthetic. They fined the resident for potential food production. The homeowner responded by placing a sign labeling the tomatoes decorative spheres of seasonal color. The HOA struggled for weeks to decide whether fruit grown for beauty instead of sandwiches violated the rules. The tomatoes continued existing, blissfully unaware they'd become defendants in the world's dumbest zoning dispute. 9. A homeowner triggered a bureaucratic meltdown by replacing a broken doorknob with one that was perfectly functional, but, brace yourself, not the official community standard curvature. The HOA insisted all doorknobs must match in shape, tone, and emotional subtlety. No one knew what emotional subtlety meant in reference to doorknobs, but the board said it with such confidence that neighbors assumed it was a real architectural concept. The homeowner provided photos showing the knob was nearly identical, only for the HOA to find them because it projected a slightly assertive silhouette. The board ultimately demanded its removal, proving tyrants don't always wear crowns. Sometimes they just obsess over doorknobs. 10. A single peach-colored curtain sparked panic when the HOA declared it insufficiently beige. The official guidelines permitted only earth neutrals, which apparently excluded anything with the audacity to resemble fruit. The board fined the resident, claiming the curtain broadcasts unintended vibrancy visible from the street. Meanwhile, the neighbor directly across the road had neon garden pinwheels, but those were considered temporary artistic motion devices and therefore acceptable. When the homeowner replaced the curtains with perfectly bland beige ones, the HOA fined them again because the fabric had a subtle sheen suggestive of optimism. Beige wasn't just a color, it was a worldview enforced by threat of penalty. 11. A resident committed a capital offense of the suburbs by parking their car facing the improper orientation. Same driveway, same car, same laws of physics, just reverse direction. The HOA fined them for vehicular positioning inconsistent with community standards. The infraction: the car's front bumper faced the street instead of the garage. According to the HOA's letter, this disturbed visual continuity. Apparently, a neighborhood's aesthetic collapses instantly if one sedan breaks formation. The resident asked why orientation mattered, and the HOA responded with a diagram that explained nothing and raised 12 new questions. Turns out the board simply preferred cars to retreat, not advance. It's the closest an HOA has come to choreographing driveway ballet. 12. A hummingbird feeder was prosecuted like it was part of an organized crime ring. The HOA insisted feeders invite unregulated wildlife interaction, as if hummingbirds were about to unionize and demand benefits. They fined the homeowner for unsanctioned ecological disruption. A neighbor pointed out that actual deer wandered through yards regularly, but the HOA clarified deer were naturally occurring residents, while hummingbirds recruited via sugar water were manufactured guests. The homeowner complied by removing the feeder, but hung a decorative wind chime shaped like a hummingbird. The HOA approved it, because apparently metal birds pose no existential threat. Nature, dangerous. Art, fine. Sugar, unforgivable. 13. A patio chair war began the day someone placed a single bright blue Adirondack chair on their porch. The HOA declared it an unauthorized relaxation device of excessive visual statement. The resident argued it was literally a chair, not a political demonstration. The HOA countered that the blue clashed with the approved spectrum of environmentally modest tones. Fines followed. Undeterred, the owner swapped the chair for identical ones in green, gray, and brown, each rejected for possessing undertones inconsistent with community serenity. Eventually, the HOA recommended an approved chair style that cost nearly as much as a budget vacation. The resident bought none of them and instead adopted the chaos strategy, leaving the porch entirely empty. The HOA applauded the restoration of purity, proving some communities legitimately prefer discomfort over color. 14. A hose storage complaint spiraled into suburban folklore when an HOA fined a resident because their garden hose was coiled in a manner that suggests disorganization. The hose was literally wrapped around a hook on the wall like any normal hose, but according to the board, it failed to demonstrate intentional symmetry. They even included a diagram of how a visually pleasing coil should look, as if homeowners were expected to earn black belts in hose artistry. The resident complied by rearranging it into a perfect spiral, only to be fined again because the spiral projected a bold rotational energy. It was the first recorded case of a hose being accused of attitude. 15. A backyard windmill decoration became a national security threat when the HOA announced it violated the rule against rotational ornaments exceeding acceptable enthusiasm. The small wooden windmill spun gently during breezes, a crime in certain jurisdictions apparently. The board fined the owner for kinetic exuberance, arguing the spinning motion distracts from architectural cohesion. Meanwhile, the neighborhood tolerated squeaky garage doors, leaf blowers, and a neighbor who practiced trombone at 6 a.m., all of which generated more chaos than a dainty rotating decoration. The resident tried locking the windmill in place, but the HOA fined them again for misrepresenting an object's intended function. The board had essentially outlawed both spinning and not spinning. It was a paradox only HOA logic could create and enforce proudly. 16. A rogue birdbath triggered a moral panic when an HOA discovered it was capable of collecting water in an unregulated manner. Translation: it was a bowl for birds. Yet, the board reacted like it was a covert reservoir, siphoning municipal resources under the cover of tasteful garden decor. They fined the homeowner for creating an unsanctioned aquatic feature, apparently believing sparrows might unionize once hydrated. When the resident emptied the bird bath and turned it upside down, the HOA fined them again for displaying inverted lawn objects, as if the bowl had evolved into a radical statement piece. They eventually suggested replacing it with a non-functional decorative basin, which was simply the same bird bath with no water and no dignity. The homeowner complied by filling it with polished stones, earning praise for eliminating the threat of liquid accumulation, officially making this the first victory in HOA history against the dangers of evaporation. 17. A citronella candle became the neighborhood's most controversial resident after the HOA labeled it an unauthorized atmospheric modifier. The candle sat peacefully on a porch, bravely discouraging mosquitoes that apparently enjoyed diplomatic privilege under HOA law. The violation letter warned that its distinct aromatic profile could alter the community's olfactory landscape, a phrase that sounds like it escaped from a perfume commercial written by lawyers. When the homeowner extinguished the candle but left it outside, the HOA fined them again for displaying a fire-related object in a dormant state, which means the candle was now dangerous lit and suspicious unlit. The board recommended citronella-free ambiance lanterns, devices that repel mosquitoes approximately never. The candle ultimately vanished, leaving the HOA triumphant and local mosquitoes celebrating with an all-you-can-bite festival featuring free access to exposed ankles. 18. A garden statue shaped like a frog wearing a tiny crown launched the HOA into a full-blown constitutional crisis. The amphibious monarch, just 10 inches tall and undeniably adorable, was accused of promoting non-approved hierarchical symbolism, as though ceramic frogs had historically toppled governments. The board insisted the statue created narrative discord within the community, which is a poetic way of saying it offended someone with no hobbies. When the homeowner replaced the Frog King with a plain frog, the HOA fined them again because the new frog suggested continuity of the previous monarchy. Apparently, frog politics follow a strict line of succession. The statue was eventually removed entirely, the HOA declared amphibian democracy restored, and the neighborhood returned to facing its real issues, such as raccoons acting like drunken burglars and lawnmower duels at sunrise. 19. A potted bamboo plant sparked existential dread after the HOA banned it for being invasive in spirit. Not scientifically invasive, spiritually invasive, meaning the board disliked its attitude. The bamboo was a small, mellow plant swaying gently like a guest who arrived early and tried not to bother anyone. The HOA fined the homeowner for harboring vegetation associated with unpredictable growth patterns, even though the plant had barely grown at all. When the owner replaced it with a plastic bamboo stalk, the HOA approved it instantly, praising its responsible representation of natural forms. The message was clear: nature itself was the problem. Plastic, however, was perfectly acceptable because it remained obedient, emotionless, and incapable of shattering community harmony by performing photosynthesis. 20. A resident triggered political upheaval with a welcome sign that simply said, "Gather." Not "overthrow," not "unite and rise," not "join the pumpkin cult," just "gather." The HOA fined them immediately for encouraging assembly without board authorization. According to the violation letter, the sign projected an invitational directive incompatible with controlled social engagement. So, friendliness, in this community, was a crime of intention. The homeowner replaced the sign with one that said "maybe," which the HOA rejected for emotional ambiguity. A blank wooden sign was rejected as silent defiance. Eventually, the board approved a sign featuring a leaf, because leaves convey neutral botanical sentiment, proving the HOA fully supports communication, as long as it communicates absolutely nothing. 21. Windblown leaves became the neighborhood's leading scandal when the HOA fined a resident for failing to maintain a leaf-free presentation, despite all the leaves originating from the HOA president's gigantic tree. The homeowner raked twice daily, but autumn continued to happen, audaciously ignoring the HOA's authority over seasons. The board fined them again, declaring that recurring leaf presence indicates sustained negligence. When the resident suggested trimming the tree, the HOA insisted it was a protected community asset, unlike the resident's sanity, which was deemed expendable. So the tree had rights, the leaves had diplomatic status, and the homeowner had fines, all because gravity refuses to recognize suburban bylaws. 22. A hose reel was outlawed after the HOA determined it introduced mechanical complexity to exterior environments. The reel was a basic plastic device, unless your personal threshold for mechanical complexity hovers somewhere around scissors. The board fined the homeowner for displaying rotational storage equipment, which made the reel sound like experimental technology smuggled out of a secret lab. When the resident removed the reel and neatly coiled the hose on the ground, the HOA fined them again, because the coil resembled a serpentine figure evoking unease. So vertical storage was too mechanical, and horizontal storage too snake-like. The board suggested storing the hose indoors, effectively turning the homeowner's hallway into a tripping hazard with a side of plumbing cosplay. 23. A backyard sandbox detonated into bureaucratic absurdity when the HOA decided it could attract informal gatherings. According to the board, children spontaneously forming friendships counted as insurgent activity. The HOA fined the homeowner for creating an environment conducive to unregulated interaction. When the resident added a lid to reduce visibility, the board fined them again because the lid formed a surface that may encourage sitting. Horizontal surfaces, apparently, were gateways to rebellion. Replacing the sand with decorative pebbles earned another warning because stones could encourage sorting behavior, which sounded like a dystopian government banning hobbies. The HOA eventually ran out of things to fear, but not before proving their commitment to stopping fun at the molecular level. 24. A small driveway security camera became the HOA's new supervillain after they ruled it a breach of community trust through optical monitoring. The camera faced the resident's own driveway, but the board treated it like a surveillance drone controlled by an unhinged billionaire. They fined the owner for documenting communal pathways without narrative approval, whatever that means. When the resident turned the camera toward their garage, the HOA fined them again because it implied suspicion toward neighbors. Meanwhile, the HOA operated multiple cameras at the neighborhood entrances, which were labeled safety enhancements rather than narrative breaches. The resident eventually removed the camera, restoring the HOA's preferred security system. Fingers crossed, porch lights on, and total denial about raccoons rummaging through trash like caffeinated accountants. 25. A tiny sunflower-themed decorative flag, barely the size of a paperback, was condemned as an unregulated textile installation. The HOA fine letter warned that sunflower imagery may symbolize unapproved optimism. In this neighborhood, positive energy required written authorization. When the homeowner replaced the flag with one featuring a single dot, the HOA rejected it for lack of contextual clarity. Finally, a flag with a muted, nearly invisible pattern was approved because it communicated nothing provocative. Residents joked that the only legal message here was total emotional neutrality, which, ironically, was the most expressive statement the HOA ever made. 26. A simple wooden bench under a tree caused an HOA meltdown for creating an implied invitation to linger. Sitting was apparently a dangerous gateway behavior. When the homeowner removed the bench, hoping this satisfied the board, the HOA fined them again because the grass underneath had a visible indentation indicating past unauthorized furniture. The board suggested reseeding the area to restore innocence to the landscape, a phrase that makes grass sound like a witness in need of relocation. The entire ordeal confirmed the HOA's stance. Nothing is more threatening than a human being potentially enjoying a moment of outdoor leisure. 27. A small herb pot turned into a federal case when the HOA declared it culinary-oriented planting. The basil and rosemary weren't plotting anything, but the HOA insisted edible vegetation could encourage domestic food production, which apparently risked transforming the neighborhood into a lawless frontier of seasoned dinners. When the owner relabeled the plants as aromatherapy specimens, the HOA fined them again for ambiguous botanical intent. Plastic herbs were eventually approved because they represented safe, non-consumable greenery, yet another point in the HOA's long-running war against anything that grows, tastes good, or contributes to human joy. 28. A small water bowl for passing dogs launched the HOA into an ethical crisis. They fined the homeowner for facilitating unauthorized hydration services, suggesting animals should remain parched unless the board sanctioned a drinking permit. Replacing the bowl with a decorative stone earned approval because the HOA only feared water, not the infrastructure that could someday contain it. The logic was impeccable in its own universe. Bowls are safe, water is chaos, and compassion for thirsty dogs qualifies as civil disobedience. 29. A porch pumpkin, firm, fresh, and fully decorative, was declared illegal after Halloween because it represented seasonal drift. The homeowner carved it into an abstract sculpture, hoping the HOA would no longer classify it as a holiday item. The board fined them again for displaying emotionally intense carvings. When the pumpkin finally decomposed, nature did the HOA's job, yet the homeowner still received a violation for visible organic deterioration. In this community, even rot was expected to follow the rules. 30. A doormat with tiny paw prints triggered a violation for suggesting the presence of multiple undocumented animals. The household had one cat. The mat, apparently, told a story the HOA found suspicious. Replacing it with a mat bearing a single paw print didn't help. The HOA claimed it implied emotional messaging through absence. A completely blank mat finally passed inspection, earning praise for its commitment to visual silence. The front door now welcomed guests with the warmth of a tax form. 31. A hanging plant basket became the focus of the HOA's most philosophical ruling yet when the board labeled it a vertically suspended biodisplay exceeding sanctioned elevation. The basket hung a modest 6 feet above the porch, defying neither gravity nor sanity, just the HOA. Lowering it by 3 inches only worsened things. The new height created unpredictable shadow behavior. The plant was ultimately removed entirely, restoring the porch to its natural state of barren compliance. The board celebrated, having successfully defeated one dangling fern and, in their minds, the very concept of plant ambition. And that's your grand tour of HOA nonsense. Proof suburban power goes straight to the clipboard. Drop your vote for the dumbest rule below and brace yourself. There's always worse coming.